The massive space station Nexus Prime floated in the darkness above the planet. Kepler 442 be like a glittering metal city. Ships from dozens of different worlds docked at its countless ports while alien beings moved through its corridors conducting the business that kept the galaxy running smoothly. Today, however, was different because today the Galactic Council would meet with representatives from a young species that had recently discovered faster than light. Travel. Captain Jake Morrison adjusted his dress uniform one final time before entering the Grand Council chamber. The Human Delegation walked behind him in perfect formation with Admiral Lisa Carter on his right and Chief Science Officer Ben Rodriguez on his left. Strategic Advisor Kate Sullivan brought up the rear while carrying a briefcase filled with detailed reports about human civilization and their 50 colonies spread across 12 star systems. The chamber itself was enormous, with a domed ceiling that displayed real-time images of the galaxy slowly rotating above their heads. 12 massive seats arranged in a perfect circle dominated the center of the room, with each one designed for a different alien species. The Supreme Arbitrator Veltar rose from the largest seat as the humans approached, and its crystalline body caught the light from 1,000 different angles while casting rainbow patterns across the polished floor. Morrison had studied the Galactic Council extensively during the 6-month journey to reach this meeting. The Council had existed for over 3,000 years and maintained peace across most of the galaxy through a simple system. Young species were offered protection and guidance in exchange for tribute and military service, while older civilizations provided wisdom and stability. It seemed like a reasonable arrangement that had prevented countless wars and allowed civilization to flourish. Veltar spoke without moving its mouth and instead projected thoughts directly into the minds of everyone present. The translation software built into their helmets converted the psychic communication into words they could understand. Welcome, representatives of humanity, to the Galactic Council chambers, where we have maintained order and prosperity for countless generations. We have reviewed your species file and are impressed by your rapid technological advancement and your successful colonization efforts. Admiral Carter stepped forward slightly and nodded respectfully toward the assembled alien representatives. On behalf of all humanity, we thank the Council for this opportunity to meet and discuss our place in the galactic community. We have heard stories about the Council's wisdom and fair treatment of member species from the few traders who have visited our worlds. The crystalline being's form shifted slightly, and Morrison noticed that several other Council members were leaning forward in their seats with obvious interest. Your species shows great promise, and we believe you would benefit greatly from Council membership and protection. The galaxy can be a dangerous place for those who lack proper guidance, and there are many hostile forces that prey upon isolated civilizations. A new voice entered their minds as a different Council member spoke up. This one belonged to General Korthak of the reptilian Soronvex species, whose people served as the Council's primary military force. We have observed your expansion patterns and note that you have established colonies in several sectors that border known raider territories. Without proper protection, these settlements remain vulnerable to attack, and your people will suffer needlessly. Morrison exchanged a quick glance with his team before responding. We appreciate your concern for our safety and recognize that space contains many dangers. However, humanity has always believed that the best defense comes from being prepared rather than depending on others for protection. Our colonies are well defended, and our fleet continues to grow stronger with each passing year. Veltar's crystalline form flickered with what might have been amusement or confusion. Young species often display such confidence when they first venture beyond their home systems. However, the galaxy has existed for billions of years, and the Council has accumulated wisdom that no single species could hope to match. We offer you the benefit of this experience along with access to our trade networks and technological databases. The Supreme Arbitrator gestured toward a floating holographic display that appeared in the center of the chamber, showing detailed star charts and economic data. Council membership provides immediate benefits that include protection by our combined fleets, access to established shipping lanes, and the opportunity to learn from civilizations that mastered interstellar travel when your world was still cooling. From its formation, Rodriguez shifted uncomfortably as he studied the data being presented while Sullivan made notes on her electronic tablet. The terms of membership were becoming clear, and they were exactly what Earth's government had expected based on intelligence gathered from independent traders and refugees who had fled Council space over the years. General Korthak continued the presentation with obvious pride in his voice. Council members contribute 70% of their military vessels to our combined defense force, while providing annual tributes of raw materials and manufactured goods based on their productive capacity. In return, they receive guaranteed protection and access to our accumulated knowledge. Spanning thousands of years of galactic civilization, Morrison felt his jaw tighten as the full scope of the Council's demands became apparent. The terms were not negotiable, and every species that had encountered the Council over the past 3 millennia had eventually accepted membership. There simply was no alternative for civilizations that wanted to survive and prosper among the stars. Admiral Carter stepped forward again, and her voice remained steady despite the shocking nature of what they were hearing. The Council's offer is certainly generous, and we understand the benefits of cooperation between different species. However, we would need time to discuss these terms with our government before making any commitments. Veltar's form brightened as psychic laughter filled their minds. Time is not a luxury that young species possess when they venture into the galaxy without proper preparation. The raiders that patrol the outer systems show no mercy to unprotected colonies, and we have received reports of increased activity in your region of space. Morrison realized that the Council was applying pressure designed to force a quick decision without giving humanity time to consider alternatives. Every species that had sat in these chairs had faced the same choice between immediate protection and potential destruction. The system had worked perfectly for thousands of years because no rational leader would risk their people's lives for the sake of independence. However, Morrison had not traveled across half the galaxy to surrender humanity's freedom before their journey among the stars had truly begun. He stood up slowly and looked directly at Veltar while his team watched in stunned silence. Supreme Arbitrator Veltar, we thank the Council for this generous offer, but humanity must respectfully decline membership at this time. The chamber fell completely silent as 12 alien civilizations tried to process what they had just heard. Morrison continued speaking before anyone could respond. We appreciate your concern for our safety and recognize the challenges that face all species who venture into deep space. However, humanity has decided to chart its own course among the stars and face whatever dangers await us with our own strength and courage. Morrison turned toward the chamber's exit while his delegation fell into formation behind him. Veltar's psychic voice boomed through the chamber with obvious confusion and growing anger. Young species do not refuse Council protection because such refusal leads only to chaos and destruction. You cannot simply walk away from the natural order that has maintained galactic stability for millennia. Morrison paused at the chamber's massive doors and looked back one final time. Ambassador Veltar, we understand your surprise, but humanity's decision is final. We came here hoping to find friends among the stars, and perhaps we still will someday. However, we will not trade our freedom for safety or our independence for protection. The Human Delegation walked through the doors and left the Council chamber in stunned silence while 12 ancient civilizations tried to comprehend what had just happened. For the first time in recorded history, a species had confidently rejected Council membership without showing any signs of fear or desperation. Morrison led his team through the station's corridors toward their dock ship while alien beings stopped to stare at the humans who had done the impossible. They had walked away from the most powerful organization in the galaxy and somehow managed to smile while doing it. 3 days had passed since the humans left Nexus Prime, and the Galactic Council still could not believe what had happened. Emergency meetings were being held across dozens of worlds as representatives tried to understand how a young species could simply walk away from an offer that every civilization in recorded history had accepted with gratitude and relief. On the water world of Tatamar, the aquatic Mercus species swam in tight circles around their crystal communication chambers while their bioluminescent patterns flashed with confusion and concern. Flowsing had served as their council representative for over 2 centuries and had witnessed the integration of 17 different species during that time. Never before had she seen anything like the Human Delegation's calm rejection of council membership. The Mercos communicated through complex patterns of light that rippled across their translucent skin, and Flowsing's display showed deep uncertainty mixed with growing alarm. Her people had joined the council willingly after raiders destroyed 3 of their underwater cities and killed millions of their kind. The council's protection had saved her species from extinction and allowed them to rebuild their civilization in safety. Flowsing activated the quantum communication array that connected her world to the Council's central command network and sent urgent messages to representatives across the galaxy. The humans had seemed intelligent during the negotiations, and their technology appeared advanced enough to suggest they understood the dangers of unprotected space travel. Yet they had rejected the Council's offer without even attempting to negotiate better terms. Meanwhile, on the desert planet Arid Holt, the insectoid Zenthkar hive mind buzzed with nervous energy as millions of individual minds tried to process the unprecedented situation. Their queen speaker Hyvenex had access to the collective memories of her entire species and could recall every detail of their own integration into the Council. 800 years earlier, the Zenthkar had been a proud warrior race that initially resisted Council membership until hostile forces destroyed half their colonies and threatened their homeworld itself. Only then had they accepted protection and tribute agreements that allowed their civilization to survive and eventually prosper. The memory of those dark days remained fresh in their collective consciousness and served as a constant reminder of what happened to species that tried to stand alone. Hyvenex sent thousands of her worker drones to search through the vast archives stored in the crystalline caves beneath their capital city. The historical records contained detailed information about every species that had encountered the Council over the past 3 millennia, and the patterns were always the same. Young civilizations would initially show resistance or hesitation before accepting the obvious benefits of Council membership. The search revealed something disturbing, however, because no species had ever rejected membership with the confidence displayed by the Human Delegation. Previous resistors had shown fear or desperation or anger, but the humans had seemed almost amused by the Council's surprise at their refusal. They had acted as if walking away from the galaxy's most powerful organization was a perfectly reasonable decision. Back on Nexus, Prime Supreme Arbitrator Veltar consulted with the ancient archives maintained by the crystalline beings who served as the Council's living memory. Their species had evolved beyond physical form millions of years ago and existed as pure energy contained within crystal matrices that could store unlimited amounts of information. They remembered every conversation and every decision made by the Council. Since its formation, the archives revealed troubling details about humanity that had been overlooked during the initial evaluation. Most species that achieved faster than light travel did so gradually over centuries of careful development with significant help from older civilizations. Humans had accomplished this breakthrough in less than 50 years through their own research and innovation without any outside assistance. More concerning was the speed of human expansion since achieving interstellar capability. Most young species established 1 or 2 colonies beyond their homeworld and focused on consolidating their gains before attempting further expansion. Humans had established 50 colonies across 12 star systems in just 5 decades. While maintaining rapid population growth and technological advancement, the crystalline archives also contained intelligence reports from Council monitoring stations throughout the galaxy. These automated systems tracked the movement of all known species and maintained detailed records of technological and military capabilities. The reports about humanity painted a picture that explained their confidence during the negotiations. Human colonies were not the vulnerable outposts typical of young civilizations, but were instead heavily fortified settlements with powerful defensive systems and well-trained military forces. Their exploration ships carried advanced weaponry, and sophisticated sensors, while their communication networks allowed for rapid coordination across vast distances. Most importantly, their industrial capacity was growing at a rate that suggested they could support a much larger military force if necessary. General Korthak reviewed these reports from his command center on the fortress world of Iron Gate while his staff tried to understand the strategic implications. His reptilian species had been the last to resist Council integration, and they had learned painful lessons about the cost of independence. The Soramvex had possessed the galaxy's most advanced military technology when they first encountered the Council, but had still been forced to accept membership after losing half their worlds to coordinated raider attacks. The General's tactical computers ran simulation after simulation trying to predict human behavior in various scenarios. Every model suggested that humanity should have accepted Council protection immediately upon learning about the dangers that awaited unprotected species. The fact that they had rejected membership despite understanding the risks indicated either extreme foolishness or knowledge of factors that the Council had not considered. Intelligence reports from the past 3 days provided even more disturbing information about human activities since leaving Nexus Prime. Rather than returning home to reconsider their decision or seeking shelter behind their established borders, human exploration ships had actually increased their deep space operations. New colonies were being established at an accelerated pace, while diplomatic missions were being sent to contact species that the Council had classified as unimportant or dangerous. Most alarming of all were reports that humans had made contact with several groups of species that existed on the fringes of Council space. These civilizations included refugees who had fled Council territory, criminals who had been exiled for various offenses, and independent traders who operated outside the established economic system. The Council had always considered these groups to be minor annoyances that posed no real threat to galactic stability. However, the prospect of these scattered groups uniting under human leadership presented a completely different scenario. Many of these species possessed advanced technology or controlled valuable resources but lacked the organization necessary to challenge Council authority. Human leadership could provide the coordination and strategic planning needed to transform these isolated groups into a genuine threat. The Council faced a situation unlike anything in their recorded history. For 3,000 years they had maintained order through a simple system that offered protection in exchange for compliance. Every species had eventually accepted membership because the alternative was destruction by hostile forces that roamed the unprotected regions of space. Now humanity had rejected their offer and was actively building relationships with the very groups that the Council used as examples of what happened to species that tried to maintain independence. The humans seemed to believe they could create an alternative to the established order and were proceeding as if success was not only possible but inevitable. Veltar called for an emergency session of the full Council to address this unprecedented crisis. Representatives from all 12 member species would need to decide how to respond to humanity's challenge to their authority. The options ranged from simply allowing the humans to learn harsh lessons through bitter experience to taking active measures to demonstrate why Council membership was not optional for species that wanted to survive. The crystalline being's form flickered with uncertainty as reports continued to arrive from across the galaxy. Humanity was not behaving like any species the Council had encountered before, and their confidence suggested they knew something that 3,000 years of galactic history had failed to teach them. For the first time since the Council's formation, its members faced the possibility that their system might not be the only way to maintain civilization among the stars. The humans had walked away from their protection and were now actively working to prove that independence was not only possible but preferable to submission. 6 months had passed since Captain Jake Morrison led the Human Delegation away from Nexus Prime, and the galaxy was beginning to see the results of humanity's bold decision. The exploration vessel EFS Discovery cruised through the Void Sector under the command of Captain Amy Foster, while her crew prepared for what could be the most important first contact mission in human history. The Void Sector had been marked as unprofitable and dangerous by the Galactic Council for over 1,000 years. The region contained few habitable worlds and was home to various species that had either rejected Council membership or been expelled for failing to meet their tribute obligations. Most civilized beings avoided the area entirely because it offered little reward and significant risk to anyone who ventured into its poorly mapped star systems. Navigation. Officer Carl Peters checked his instruments one final time as they approached the coordinates where Council intelligence reports suggested they might find the Kethmore fleet. The nomadic warrior traders had been driven from their homeworld 2 centuries earlier when they refused to accept the taxation policies that came with Council protection. Since then, they had survived by raiding supply convoys and selling their services as mercenaries to anyone willing to pay their prices. Engineer Maya Thompson monitored the Discovery's defensive systems while Dr. Ryan Clark reviewed everything humanity knew about Kethmore culture and biology. The report suggested they were a proud species with advanced military technology who valued personal honor above material wealth. They had chosen exile rather than submission and had somehow managed to maintain their independence despite being vastly outnumbered by Council forces. Captain Foster felt a mixture of excitement and nervousness as her ship dropped out of faster than light travel near a massive asteroid field that served as a temporary base for the Kethmore fleet. Dozens of sleek warships emerged from hiding places among the floating rocks, while their weapons systems powered up in preparation for what they assumed would be another Council attempt to force them into compliance. The lead Kethmore vessel was twice the size of the Discovery and bristled with energy cannons that could reduce a human ship to scattered atoms in seconds. Warchief Brantock commanded the flagship from a bridge designed for beings who stood nearly 3 meters tall and possessed 4 powerful arms ending in clawed hands. His people had evolved on a high-gravity world where only the strongest survived to adulthood. Foster opened a communication channel and transmitted the universal greeting protocols that humanity had learned from independent traders. Warchief Brantock, this is Captain Amy Foster of the Earth Federation ship Discovery, requesting permission to approach your vessel under peaceful intentions. We bring greetings from humanity and hope to discuss matters of mutual benefit to both our species. The response came back in heavily accented but understandable human language as Brantock studied the strange ship that had appeared in his territory. Human vessel, you travel far from Council space to reach this forgotten region of the galaxy. State your business quickly before my warriors decide you pose a threat to our people. Foster took a deep breath before delivering the message that could change everything for both species. Warchief, we come seeking allies rather than subjects and friends rather than servants. Humanity has learned about your people's struggle for independence, and we believe our species share similar values regarding freedom and self-determination. The Kethmore leader's laughter boomed across the communication channel as he tried to understand what the humans could possibly offer his people. Small human, your species has existed among the stars for barely 50 of your years, while my people have fought for survival for 2 centuries. What could you possibly provide that would interest warriors who have faced the Council's entire military machine and live to tell about it? Foster gestured to Peters, who transmitted detailed technical specifications for human defensive technology along with proposals for mutual defense agreements and shared colonization rights. Warchief, we offer partnership between equals rather than the submission demanded by the Council. Our species may be young, but we have developed innovations that could benefit your people, while your experience and knowledge could help us avoid the mistakes that have trapped so many civilizations. The data package contained information about human shield generators that could adapt to incoming weapons fire, along with details about their improved faster-than-light drives and advanced sensor arrays. More importantly, it included proposals for economic cooperation that would allow both species to benefit from trade agreements without either side being forced to pay tribute to a third party. Brantock studied the information while his technical specialists analyzed the human technology and found it surprisingly advanced for such a young civilization. The humans had somehow developed defensive systems that could compete with anything the Council possessed, while their exploration ships incorporated design improvements that the Kethmore had never considered. The warship made a decision that would echo across the galaxy for generations to come. Human captain, your people intrigue me with their strange ideas about cooperation between species. I invite you to dock with our flagship so we can discuss these matters in person and determine if your words match your intentions. Similar scenes were playing out across the frontier regions as human diplomatic missions made contact with dozens of species that had been written off by the Council as worthless or dangerous. On the mining world of Asteroid Belt 7 Colony Ship Commander, Tim Walker was negotiating with the silicon-based Roktar, who had been ignored by the Council because their homeworld lacked the organic resources that most civilizations required. Walker offered the Roktar advanced atmospheric processors that could create suitable environments for both species in exchange for access to the rare minerals that their people could extract from asteroid fields that no other species could survive. The concept of mutual benefit was so foreign to the Roktar that it required 3 different translators working together to explain the basic principles. The Roktar had evolved in the vacuum of space and possessed natural abilities that made them perfect for mining operations in environments that would kill most other life forms. However, they lacked the technology needed to process the materials they extracted and had been forced to trade with unscrupulous merchants who cheated them at every opportunity. Walker's proposal offered them fair prices for their materials along with the technology needed to establish their own processing facilities. In return, humanity would gain access to resources that were essential for building the advanced ships and defensive systems that would allow them to maintain their independence from Council control. News of these successful negotiations spread quickly through the informal communication networks used by independent traders and refugee groups throughout the frontier regions. Species that had spent decades or centuries hiding from Council attention suddenly found themselves receiving diplomatic contact from a young civilization that offered partnership rather than conquest. The Outcast Alliance had existed as a loose confederation of rejected and exiled species for over 800 years, but had never possessed the unity or resources needed to challenge Council authority. Individual groups would occasionally cooperate on specific projects, but they lacked the leadership and coordination necessary to present a unified front against their common enemy. Humanity's approach offered something completely different because they were not seeking to become the dominant power in a new alliance, but instead wanted to create a genuine partnership where each species contributed according to their abilities and received benefits based on their needs. The concept was revolutionary because it suggested that civilizations could cooperate without one group controlling all the others. Captain Foster completed her negotiations with Warchief Brantic, while Walker finalized his agreements with the Roktar, and similar successes were being reported from human diplomatic missions across dozens of star systems. Each new alliance brought additional resources and capabilities that strengthened humanity's position while providing their partners with benefits they had never experienced under Council rule. The Galactic Council's intelligence networks were reporting increasingly alarming developments as human colonies appeared in strategic locations that had been dismissed as worthless frontier space. These settlements featured powerful defensive systems and served as bases for further expansion, while providing safe havens for species that had been driven from their homeworlds by Council policies. Most concerning of all was the speed with which humanity was building these new relationships. The Council had assumed that any species capable of challenging their authority would require centuries to develop the necessary alliances and resources. Instead, humanity was accomplishing in months what should have taken decades, while demonstrating technology and tactics that suggested they had been preparing for this moment far longer than anyone had realized. The galaxy was beginning to change in ways that the Council had never imagined possible, and humanity was proving that there might indeed be alternatives to 3,000 years of established order. 1 year had passed since humanity walked away from the Galactic Council, and the consequences of that decision were shaking the foundations of galactic civilization. Emergency sessions ran continuously on Nexus Prime as reports flooded in from across Council space about the growing threat posed by what intelligence agencies had begun calling the Frontier Alliance. Supreme Arbitrator Veltar S. Crystalline form flickered with stress patterns that had never been observed in the 3,000-year history of the Council. The assembled representatives from 12 ancient civilizations sat in stunned silence as they reviewed data that seemed impossible to believe. 47 species across 63 star systems had formally joined humanity's alliance in just 12 months, while dozens more were actively negotiating partnership agreements. The most shocking aspect of these developments was not the speed with which the alliance was growing, but the principles upon which it operated. Unlike the Council's tributary system where younger species paid for protection with resources and military service, the Frontier Alliance functioned on the basis of mutual benefit and voluntary cooperation. Member species contributed according to their abilities and received support based on collective defense rather than submission to a central authority. Admiral Richard Stone commanded the human battlecruiser F's Defiance as it approached the Sigma Quadrant where the Council tributary species Pelter was under attack by savage Wraithkin raiders. The Council's standard response protocol had already been implemented with evacuation ships removing essential personnel while military forces calculated acceptable losses for the remaining population. Stone's tactical display showed 3 Council destroyers maintaining a safe distance from the battle while Wraithkin assault ships bombed civilian targets on the planet's surface. The Council commanders were following established procedures that prioritized the safety of their own forces over the lives of the people they were supposedly protecting. The human admiral opened a communication channel to the Council force commander, while his ships dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the system. Council vessels, this is Admiral Stone of the Earth Federation requesting permission to assist in the defense of Pelter against hostile raiders. The response came from Captain Zekanor of the Council destroyer Vigilant, whose reptilian voice carried obvious confusion and concern. Human Admiral, you have no authority in this system, and the Pelter are under Council protection. Withdraw your forces immediately before you interfere with official military operations. Stone studied the tactical situation, while his weapons officers prepared for combat against an enemy that had terrorized the outer systems for decades. The Wraithkin were savage beings who lived only to destroy and consume other civilizations. But they had been allowed to operate freely because the Council found it easier to evacuate threatened worlds than to engage in costly military campaigns. The human admiral made a decision that would change everything about how the galaxy viewed the difference between Council protection and Frontier Alliance partnership. Captain Zekanor, we respectfully decline your order to withdraw because we cannot stand by while innocent people are being slaughtered. The EFS Defiance and her escort ships are moving to engage the raiders. What happened next shocked everyone who witnessed it, including the Wraithkin themselves. Human ships moved with unprecedented agility while their adaptive shield systems absorbed incoming weapons fire and converted it into power for their own defensive systems. Their tactics incorporated lessons learned from dozens of allied species and demonstrated coordination that the Council had never seen before. The battle lasted only 40 minutes before the surviving Wraithkin ships fled the system while their assault forces on the planet's surface were either destroyed or captured. Stone's fleet had accomplished what Council forces claimed was impossible by defeating a major raider attack without suffering a single casualty or allowing any civilian deaths. On the planet below, the aftermath proved even more shocking than the battle itself when Pelter leaders asked what tribute humanity expected for their rescue. Stone's response was broadcast across the galaxy's communication networks and reached billions of beings who had never imagined such words could be spoken by a military commander. We do not want tribute from people we have helped because friends do not charge each other for doing what is right. The implications of this statement spread like wildfire through Council space as species that had paid tribute for centuries began questioning why they needed Council protection when humans offered better security for free. The Economic Foundation of the Council system depended on tributary payments that funded their military operations and administrative costs, but the Frontier Alliance had demonstrated that effective defense could be provided through voluntary cooperation. Intelligence reports from across the galaxy painted an increasingly disturbing picture for Council leadership. Human technology had advanced at a rate that should have been impossible for such a young civilization, while their defensive capabilities now exceeded anything in the Council's arsenal. Their ships could adapt to enemy weapons in real time, while their tactics incorporated innovations that suggested they had been studying galactic warfare for far longer than 50 years. The Council's military exercises revealed additional problems. As their forces struggled to develop countermeasures for human technology, traditional energy weapons proved ineffective against adaptive shields, while kinetic projectiles were intercepted by point defense systems that seemed to predict incoming attacks before they were fired. Most disturbing of all was the realization that humans had developed these capabilities without any outside assistance or access to Council databases. Economic warfare presented an equally serious threat, as the Frontier Alliance established trade routes that bypassed Council space entirely. Species that had been forced to sell their resources at artificially low prices to Council merchants suddenly found themselves receiving fair market value from human traders who offered mutually beneficial exchange agreements. On the industrial world of Factory Prime Manufacturing Supervisor Nexus received an unexpected visit from Human Trade Representative Beth Collins, who offered industrial fabrication techniques that could triple their production efficiency. When Nexus explained that Council regulations required approval for all technology transfers, Collins simply left her contact information and departed with a friendly smile. Within weeks, Factory Prime's productivity began declining as workers learned about the improvements they were being denied, while neighboring systems that had joined the Frontier Alliance reported massive increases in manufacturing output. The contrast became impossible to ignore as Alliance worlds prospered while Council territories stagnated under bureaucratic restrictions. The psychological impact proved just as devastating as the economic and military challenges. For 3,000 years, the Council had maintained control by convincing species that submission was necessary for survival, and that independence led inevitably to destruction. Humanity's success had shattered this fundamental assumption and demonstrated that alternatives to Council rule were not only possible but superior. General Korthak reviewed battle reports from his command center while his staff tried to understand how human forces had achieved such decisive victories against enemies that had plagued the galaxy for generations. The Sorovek's military had studied warfare for thousands of years and possessed combat experience that spanned dozens of major conflicts, yet they could not explain how humans had developed such effective tactics in such a short time. The generals' computers ran simulation after simulation, trying to model potential confrontations between Council forces and the Frontier Alliance. Every scenario suggested that direct military action would result in massive casualties while failing to achieve decisive victory. The humans had somehow developed defensive and offensive capabilities that made traditional Council tactics obsolete. More troubling than humanity's military success was their approach to governance and diplomacy. The Frontier Alliance operated without the rigid hierarchies that characterized Council administration, while making decisions through consensus building rather than authoritarian decree. Member species retained their cultural independence while contributing to collective goals that benefited everyone involved, reports from Council. Intelligence agents embedded in Alliance territory described societies that were thriving under the new system. Economic productivity had increased dramatically while crime rates dropped and scientific advancement accelerated. The contrast with Council territories was becoming impossible to hide as news of Alliance prosperity spread through unofficial communication networks. Veltar consulted the ancient archives one final time, hoping to find some precedent for dealing with a challenge of this magnitude. The crystalline records contained detailed information about every crisis. The Council had faced over 3 millennia, but nothing compared to the current situation. Previous threats had come from hostile alien empires or internal rebellions that could be suppressed through superior military force. Humanity represented something completely different. because they offered a genuine alternative to council rule rather than simply opposing it. They had proven that species could cooperate without surrender at will years after humanity's rejection of council membership. The galaxy had been transformed beyond recognition. The Galactic Council that once commanded the loyalty of hundreds of species now controlled less than 60% of their former territory, while Supreme Arbitrator Veltar stood before a half-empty assembly hall watching their ancient empire crumble. The catalyst for this massive shift had come during the Battle of Nexus Point, where a combined force of council ships and Wraithkin raiders launched a coordinated assault against the human colony world New Terra. The attack was designed to demonstrate what happened to species that rejected council protection while providing the Wraithkin with a rich target in exchange for their military cooperation. Admiral Susan Davis commanded the defense from aboard the battleship EFS Vanguard while coordinating forces from 23 allied species in the largest space battle the galaxy had witnessed in over 1,000 years. The human colony contained only 12 million inhabitants, but the Frontier Alliance had committed everything to its defense because they understood that failure would destroy the credibility of their entire movement. The attacking force consisted of 40 Council warships and 60 Wraithkin assault vessels, while the defenders could muster only 30 ships from various Alliance species. The numerical disadvantage seemed overwhelming, but Davis had spent months preparing for exactly this scenario while incorporating tactical innovations developed by her diverse allies. The battle began when Council forces dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the New Terra system, expecting to find a lightly defended human outpost that could be easily overwhelmed. Instead, they encountered a carefully prepared defensive network that included Kethmer stealth ships, Roktar asteroid fortresses, and human vessels equipped with the most advanced technology the Alliance could produce. What shocked the Council commanders was not just the strength of the defense, but the coordination displayed by forces from so many different species. Each group contributed their unique capabilities while human strategic doctrine adapted in real time to changing battlefield conditions. The Frontier Alliance fought as a unified force rather than a collection of separate fleets trying to cooperate. The decisive moment came when several Council tributary species began defecting in the middle of the battle. The crews of these ships had watched the Alliance risk everything to defend a single colony while their own commanders calculated acceptable losses and prepared to withdraw if casualties became too high. The contrast between genuine partnership and cold calculation proved impossible to ignore. Captain Rexter of the Council destroyer Retribution was the first to switch sides when he ordered his weapons turned against the Wraithkin raiders instead of the human defenders. His announcement over the general communication channel inspired similar defections across the Council fleet as commanders realized they were fighting for an empire that viewed them as expendable tools rather than valued allies. The Battle of Nexus Point ended with a complete Alliance victory that cost the Council nearly half their attack force while demonstrating to the entire galaxy that humanity's partners would fight to the death to protect each other. More importantly, the defections during combat showed that even species loyal to the Council were beginning to question whether their ancient rulers truly had their best interests at heart. Colony Administrator Chris Morgan supervised the reconstruction of New Terra while simultaneously hosting the first interspecies cooperation summit in Alliance history. Representatives from over 100 species gathered on the battle-scarred world to establish formal frameworks for their growing confederation, while creating institutions that could govern a truly free galactic community. The meeting took place in temporary structures erected among the ruins left by Wraithkin bombardment rather than in some neutral space station or pristine conference facility. The symbolism was deliberate because it demonstrated what the Alliance was willing to sacrifice for its principles while showing that their commitment to freedom extended to every member regardless of size or strategic importance. Morgan opened the summit by welcoming delegates from species that had never been allowed to participate in galactic governance under Council rule. Former refugees and exiles sat alongside representatives from ancient civilizations, while humans facilitated discussions between groups that had been enemies for centuries. The diversity was overwhelming, but somehow the participants found common ground in their shared desire for independence and mutual respect. The summit produced a charter that established the basic principles of alliance governance while creating mechanisms for collective decision-making that respected the sovereignty of individual species. Unlike the council system where tribute and obedience were mandatory, the new framework operated on voluntary participation and consensus building. Members could withdraw at any time, but few chose to do so because the benefits of cooperation far exceeded the costs. Economic integration proceeded rapidly as trade barriers disappeared and species began specializing in activities that matched their natural abilities. The Roktar expanded their mining operations while the Kethmor provided security for merchant convoys, and the aquatic Murkos developed underwater colonies that served as neutral meeting grounds for diplomatic negotiations. Humans contributed advanced technology and strategic coordination while learning from their partners about everything from agricultural techniques to artistic expression. The Council's final attempt to reassert control came in the form of an ultimatum, demanding that all species choose between Council membership and alliance partnership within 30 days. The decree was intended to force wavering civilizations to declare their loyalty while demonstrating that neutrality was not an option in the emerging conflict. The response surprised even alliance leadership, as nearly three-quarters of Council tributary species formally withdrew their membership and requested admission to the Frontier Alliance. The exodus included several of the Council's oldest allies, who cited humanity's example as proof that independence was both possible and preferable to continued submission. Species that remained loyal to the Council did so out of genuine preference rather than fear or obligation. The Galactic Council continued to exist, but as one government among many rather than the supreme authority over civilized space. Their territory shrank to include only worlds that actively chose Council membership, while their influence diminished to levels not seen since their formation 3,000 years earlier. The transformation was completed when Veltar sent a private communication to Admiral Morrison, who had been promoted to overall commander of Alliance forces. The ancient crystalline being's message was simple but represented a fundamental shift in how the galaxy's oldest civilization viewed their relationship with younger species. Morrison, we underestimated your people and misunderstood the nature of true strength. We believe that power came from controlling others, but you have taught us that it comes from earning their trust and respect. Perhaps there is wisdom in your approach that our long existence failed to reveal. Morrison's response reflected humanity's consistent approach to galactic politics, while extending an invitation that would have been unthinkable just 2 years earlier. Ambassador Veltar, the Alliance has always welcomed those who come as friends rather than masters. Your people's knowledge and experience could contribute greatly to our shared goals. If you choose to join us as equals rather than rulers, the final irony was that several former Council species, including the crystalline archivists, eventually did request Alliance membership while bringing with them technologies and wisdom accumulated over millennia. They discovered that sharing knowledge freely produced better results than hoarding it for political advantage, while finding that cooperation yielded greater security than domination. The galaxy entered a new age where diversity strengthened rather than threatened civilization, while species worked together as partners rather than subjects. Humanity's greatest contribution was not their technology or military prowess, but their revolutionary idea that different civilizations could cooperate without surrendering their independence or cultural identity. The Galactic Council still existed in a reduced form while continuing to serve species that preferred their traditional approach to governance. However, they now operated as one option among many in a cosmos where walking away from a bad deal had led to building something far better than anyone had imagined possible. The transformation was complete and irreversible because it was based on principles that benefited everyone involved rather than systems that enriched some at the expense of others. Humanity had proven that the galaxy was large enough for multiple approaches to civilization, while demonstrating that freedom and cooperation could coexist with stability and prosperity.